Everyone, happy Sunday. Welcome to the Power Chat series. Today we have the WKU post-show world champion guest, Ben Stewart. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Isabella?
Good. Okay, well, I'm excited to have you on. First of all, congratulations on an amazing career. This was a big tournament for you after competing for many, many years. Tell me about how it went.
Well, it is, it's kind of bittersweet. I knew that this was going to be my last World Championships. I technically retired in 2005, just to date me 20 years ago because of a major uh, groin injury that I had had. Came back a few years later, fought just part-time until 2013, retired again, got a
Mm.
hip replacement, started my family. And here we are about 5 years ago. My hips were feeling okay and I started fighting again. So I had a hip replacement in 2015 and the doctor said within 10 years, you're going to need your other one. Well, I can tell you right now that the moment I stepped in the ring last week in Greece, the very first 10 seconds, I knew my right hip was completely done. So, so so the bittersweet was, I'd wish my last Worlds could have been feeling a little bit better out there, but at the same time, I'm always up for the challenge. So, but yeah, this is definitely it with the 2024 Worlds.
And yet you still came out on top. You have a belt in hand, power ring, you won. Tell me actually how yeah, it looks great. It's a
That's pretty
beautiful
cool.
ring.
That's a nice ring.
It's gigantic. Tell me a little bit more though about the competition itself and your performance.
So, I Lori Stanley, she called me up in the summer and she was like, "Hey, are you going to represent us?" Because the previous year I came to their trials and I was going to represent the U.S. in 2023. I came to their trials and in the finals I took a knee and broke two ribs. So it took me about a year actually to recover from that. And so she called me up this summer. "Hey, do you want to come out?" "Yeah, okay. I'm going to sign you up for all the divisions, 45, 35, 18, because normally I fight, doesn't matter my age, I fight them all."
Mhm.
And so I don't actually do karate or kickboxing. I do zero physical. I haven't thrown a kick in 2 years. All I do is I focus on my VO2 max, my conditioning, my flexibility. I do yoga, like I stretch and I try to get my conditioning right. So the upside to that is you don't have as many bumps and bruises and you feel good. The downside to that is the moment you start fighting, you realize why you don't fight. So, so I went out there and the first division was the 45-year-old division, which is my actual age group. And I was able to go through, I had a bye and then I did the quarters and then I did the semis and I won those fights. But right away I got in there, I could feel, wait a second, why is my right hip not working? And I was the kicker coming up, like through fighting with Raymond and Jason Tanks and these guys back in the 90s, 2000s. And I was a kicker. After the hip replacement, I was hands only.
Mm.
So with hands only, you need to be able to blitz off the lead. You need to push off for the right. And normally I can push off at the right. So I felt it right away. I'm like, ooh, this isn't good. I got to the finals of the 45, and about an hour later, I had to fight the 35. And in that 1 hour, my literally right hip completely shut down. Um, I could barely walk, and I'm like, I'm here anyways. Let's just go in and do it. I ended up losing a close one in the semis. That would have got me to 35 gold. And by the time the 18s came, I couldn't even walk. So that night, I messaged my wife and I said, "Don't worry, hon. This is the very last one. I'm never doing this again. My hip is much, much worse than I realized."
Mm.
Luckily, that was the Wednesday, the eliminations. Luckily, I had till the Friday before the finals. So the next day, I spent 8 hours massage, cold plunge, jacuzzi. I did everything I could to try to recover as much as I could. And then I went to bed that night, the night before, and I remember texting my son and just saying, "I'm not even sure if I'm going to fight tomorrow." And he's like, "No, no, Daddy, you got to bring the gold home." I'm like, holy smokes. So I woke up Friday morning and I could walk. So I was like, "Hey, let's go in." It's a quick 2 to 4 minutes, no big deal. So
Yeah.
uh,
Wow.
the fight, yeah, it's just it's frustrating because your brain still remembers what it can do and it thinks it can do things, but since I never do this, and I got out there and I quickly realized, even in that second division, I was down by 2 points with like 5 seconds to go in the semis, and normally I'd be like, skip kick this guy in the head.
Mhm. Boom.
Okay, yeah, just drop the axe or whatever. And that's literally my head's like, just do that. And then I kind of laughed to myself saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And I just bowed. It was it. So, but it was fun to be out there. You know, I always like to challenge myself, and I have not physically taught in a karate school since 2008.
Wow.
So I owned multiple schools in Ottawa and ran the national team and that, but I actually sold my schools in 2009, and that's when I started my family. And so I haven't been on a karate floor for all those years, and I've tried to continue fighting just by training other methods.
Everything else.
You
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And I know everybody who's putting in the hours and
Yeah,
countless buckets of sweat on the mat would be like, that's unreasonable. But everybody has their own method. And as long as, to me, you're staying in shape and you're fit and it's just so natural. It's like riding a bike sometimes.
that's 100% what it was. I mean, my coach, it's probably a little bit before your time, but my coach was the great Steve Nasty Anderson. And
I know the name, so I feel like
yeah, so he's a legend, and a legend, and one of the greatest sport karate fighters of all time, arguably the best. And he moved to Canada in the 90s, and I was in high school at the time, and I remember reading about him in the magazines as a kid doing martial arts, and I started with Mr. Anderson in 95. And I think back to those first years and the level of it's almost like rewiring your DNA. The level of repetition, basics, it becomes you. And that's why I always know, like, no matter what, like, as long as I'm in shape, I can show up and the body will just do what I know it knows how to do. It's just years and years of that. So,
yeah.
And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fights. So for sure.
I mean, you're in the thousands. I know you had calculated. At what point did you start kind of, what, I should keep track of the number?
Uh, I never did initially.
Okay.
And, the funny thing is that my fighting career, I started martial arts in 1987, and my third class, I went to the Quebec Championships. So I started doing tournaments right away as a child, which, a lot of these people watching this video did the same thing. And so I was doing, point sparring then, but when I turned 17 with Mr. Anderson, a lot of people don't realize with Mr. Anderson, 60% of my training with Mr. Anderson was boxing, 40% karate, like point. But I fought in full contact. I fought in knockdown karate. I fought in kickboxing, in continuous. So at these world championships, I was fighting two different divisions. And now there's been a lot of splits. There's lots of different organizations. But at the time, WK and WKU were the two main organizations through the 90s and 2000s. And there'd be 50, 60 guys in the division. And that's both in the continuous kickboxing and the point. So just the worlds and the trials alone, I'd be adding 30, 40, 50 fights just to qualify for the team and then go there. But the biggest for me, and I don't know if it's 1,100, honestly, like it's somewhere just
Give
over
or take.
Yeah. I thought back, knowing this was the end, I thought back to myself and I'm like, from about 98 through 2005, so for those 7-8 years, I was averaging 30 tournaments a year. That's tournaments. And the average tournament, you figure you're, I don't know, 5 to 10 fights based on the divisions and based on team fights and everything else like that. So I started doing the math and I'm like, I was doing 150 fights a year, 100 to 150 fights a year for 7 years straight. Out of that window, maybe only 10 to 30 a year. But then I added it all up and I'm like, I'm between 1,000 and 1,100. So I don't know what the number is. And it really doesn't matter. It's just 37 years and a lot of fights.
For sure. Now, I saw on social media, you said you came back in 2018 in part to be a role model for your kids, set an example. To what extent does that mission play into kind of now your mentality that you're stepping away, that you're retiring, that, the hip needs to be addressed?
Yeah. If you look at my whole career and, when I was fighting, like at my peak, when I was fighting Walker World Championships and, full contact kickboxing fights, all of that happened before my first child was born. So Sydney was born in 2010. I was really done in 2005, to be honest. I mean, everything after that was just kind of part-time in that. I have a sales company in Canada. So I was always very busy with work through the spring and summer, which is when the busy NASCA circuit is. Like, so normally, like for NASCA, I came down and did the Pan Ams a few times. I did the Diamonds a lot. I did the competes. So I was more like fighting NASCA like January to February and then the fall. But I'd always miss that big spring because I own a landscaping company. So when I finished really actively, I started having my family, and my children, they fell in love with triathlon. They swim, bike, and run, and they train 20 hours a week. They're such an inspiration to me.
Mm.
So when I had the hip replacement done, I never thought I was going to throw another kick or a punch again in my life. I just got into yoga, and then in 2018 I started feeling better, and I'm like, why don't I call the club up? Because I mean, my school that I sold, it's still there. It's still, doing really well in that. And I called them up. I said, let me come in and spar with you guys. And they kind of laughed like, really? You're going to come in and fight? You're 40. I'm like, yeah, I know. Let me just come in and see what's up. And I went in there, and I found it was crazy. I wasn't kicking, but I was barely even sweating. And I'm like, why is this so easy? I'm like, okay, well, kicking is tiring. And I've been in a hot room, hot yoga for 5 years, normal temperature now. Like, I don't even get hot. And so the mentality was, for my kids, I try to be a top-down leader to my kids, and they're out there inspiring me with their work ethic. And I'm like, you know what? If I don't know, if I can get in shape, maybe I can go in and do this and show them that their dad is a fighter, and show them that there's reward behind discipline, and there's reward behind suffering. And so they're now all old enough to kind of see me making the decision. Yeah, I'm going to fight this year. And they're looking at me like, Dad, you old man. Like, they're kind of making fun of me a little bit. And then they start to see the training, and they start to see the effort level and the discipline. And I feel that that's really, as a father, that served me well, because a lot of people come to me and say, how do your kids train so hard? And, Friday, my son Sydney was in the regional championships for swimming. He swims the 500. He was in a high school swim meet Friday. Yesterday morning, both my kids were at the state bike championship. So like they biked the best bikers in the state. My daughter won the state championship. My son came third. This morning we got up. We just spent 3 hours at Lake Louisa biking. What 8, 12, and 14-year-old is doing that kind of thing, and doing that because of choice, not because their dad's forcing them. Yeah. So I mean, I could have been a karate instructor and had my kids on a karate floor, but I know what they love, and you support what they love. So I really do it to try to show my kids that, your dad was an athlete, your dad is competitive, and this is a good path to take, whether it's triathlon or karate or whatever.
Yeah. Now, this WKU was in Greece. I
Yep.
saw so many photos of people enjoying the country itself and the event. Just overall, what were your thoughts on the tournament?
Tournament's really good. I mean, Klaus Nanamacher in the picture there on the left there. Klaus is a close friend of mine. He was the world champion, the heavyweight world champion until 2000. And in 2001, when I won my first world title, I beat him in the semis to actually get my first world title 24 years ago. So I've always kind of supported him. And the WKA, was huge. Then there was the split. Then there was WKC, and there's, these different organizations. But what I really like about the WKU is it's kind of like a family vibe.
Yeah, I definitely can even tell from the photos.
Yeah, you've got a lot of families, a lot of kids, and the countries really get along well. Like, as much as it's competition, there's always that good vibe where at the end of during the competition, you're coming over, you're chatting after, you're over at the restaurant together, and even going on tours and that together. So the tournament was really well run. Obviously I think there was quite a bit more competitors than they had expected. It was a WKU record with over 2,200 divisions or something like that went on. So the actual facility was a little bit yeah, it was tight. I mean, we've all been in karate tournaments where you got everyone right around the ring, and like you go to the edge and they're pushing you back in. It kind of felt old school like that. But no, it was right in the hotel. It was an all-inclusive hotel, really nice, good food. And you walk outside and you're looking at the beach. Like, it was beautifully done.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, you're in Florida now. It's a
Mhm.
hub for martial arts. I know you said you haven't stepped, are you kind of focusing on your kids' triathlons? Do you ever get a chance to check out any local events near you?
Um, I went over to one of the WKC had a Worlds a couple of years ago, so I
Okay.
went over to watch some of the fighters there. I wanted to see Richard Plowden's son. I wanted to see some guy because like I haven't really been around during this most recent era, so
Yeah.
I mean, I was fighting Ross Levine when he was 18, 19 years old. You know what I mean? So like this most recent era, I haven't really seen a lot of that. I went
Yeah.
over there. There is a really there's a really strong Florida kind of martial arts hub
Mhm.
and tournaments all the time. And that was one of the things Alex had mentioned to me. He's like, man, you're right here. Why don't you come
Yeah.
check out the scene? And I went over and I trained with Abdi last year
Okay.
um, in Orlando, and
If anything, I'm sure they'd love to have you as a judge or
yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean, that honestly, like the judging is pretty exciting to me. Like I really liked that aspect as as a karate school owner, and I see how weak a lot of the judging is. So they could definitely use it. For me, it's pretty crazy. I mean, if you look at the schedule, because all three of my kids are national level triathletes, even though it's not a triathlon, I have them train against specialists. So my kids go to swim meets against swimming specialists. They go to bike races against bikers. They do cross country races against runners. And then when there's a triathlon, so
Yeah.
52 weeks, we are at something 48 or 49 of them.
Yeah,
And
definitely need to keep track of your kids' names when they become. I mean, they already are such a high level, but definitely names to
they're
know.
they're 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 working really hard, and the biggest thing is, I mean, a lot of people are like, man, are these guys on an Olympic path or whatever the case? And like honestly, there's 350 million people here, so it's tough to crack it. They are still Canadian, so you never know, we might have to cross back across the border to get to the Olympics. I don't know. But honestly, as a pastime, as a family, to be able to spend that quality time with your kids, you know even though my hip's killing me out there on the bike today, I'm still doing it with them, and it's just a great thing for your kids to have. There's a lot of challenges there, but so I if I know about the tournaments and I'm free, I'd be happy to come by. I know Jeremy Roke's got like a circuit close to here, and that type of thing. So I'd be definitely happy to be a part of it.
Awesome, great. Well, Ben, it was a pleasure to have you on the Power Chat series. Congratulations on your achievements, both at WKU and in your career. It was nice to have you on.
Thank you so much. This is what they look like. That's what they look
They
like.
are sizable. They look great. I mean, I could even see it in the picture.
I
How
like that one, but this was a nice touch. This was the nice touch right there. That's I don't know. So this one went to my son Sydney. The medal went to Sterling, and then Alex Reyes right before my finals. He walks up to me and he goes, "Ben, you win this fight, I'm going to give you the power ring." I'm like, "What's the power ring?" And then he showed it to me. I'm like, "Oh, it's pink. Oh, I got to get that for my daughter. Serena's going to love that. She wore this to school the next day." So that was pretty cool. So
That's adorable.
thanks for having me on.
Your impression of Alex is spot on. So funny. Okay.
You
All
got
right.
it.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for
All right.
watching, guys.
Appreciate it. All right.
All right. We're off.